Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9, 2023, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Good, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution gives the responsibility for the nation's finances to the House of Representatives. It's the House's responsibility to pay the nation's debts, to manage the nation's finances, to protect our ability to borrow when necessary. Although the founders warned us about the dangers of excessive debt, the dangers of perpetual debt, and yet we find ourselves with the highest level of debt to our GDP that we have had since World War II. Of course, the World War II generation came out of a literal battle, a war to save the world from imperialist Japan and Nazi Germany, which of course caused significant borrowing to fund that war, to fund that conflict. But that generation paid that debt down to a manageable level shortly thereafter. But here we are today with $32 trillion in debt, nearly $100,000 per American citizen. I've said that many times on this floor, in committee hearings, in speeches, and interviews, $100,000 per American citizen. One time when I said this on this very floor, it was opposite the then budget chairman from the other side, Mr. Speaker, and when his turn came to speak, he said, "Stop saying that. We're not asking anybody to pay it back," as if it was not real, as if it was monopoly money, and if it didn't matter. However, the days of spending without consequence are now over. And I believe the American people are beginning to connect the numbers, the stats, the dollars, what they hear about with federal spending, the deficit, and the national debt to their own very lives, because the American people are suffering from 40-year high inflation. Matter of fact, the Consumer Price Index showed today that prices have risen 17% in the 2.5 years since President Biden took office. That means $1,000 in 2020 is now worth just $832 today. Americans are experiencing record high inflation, 40-year high inflation, but it's even higher than the 17% for the essentials, for groceries, for gasoline in the tank, for utilities, and yes, for housing costs. The average mortgage today, the average mortgage payment is $1,218, which is more than double what it was when President Biden assumed office. That is a direct result of the federal spending causing massive inflation, which was then reacted to by the Biden Fed that's raised interest rates to 20-year highs, further exacerbating the problem. And then, of course, we've had our credit rating lowered for just the second time in our history. Americans are suffering under this debt. Americans' futures are more bleak financially because of this debt. It's a terrible threat to our children and our grandchildren. And we, as a Republican majority, must do something about it. We, as a Republican majority, elected by the American people after running on a platform of fiscal responsibility, are leading a House of Representatives that will have a $2 trillion deficit this year. So we're here tonight with this special order time to talk about our spending, to talk about our deficit, to talk about our national debt, and to talk about the budget battle that we are in at this very moment, the appropriations process to fund our government, and what we will do with the faith and the trust the American people placed in us last November when they gave us the House majority. And so I'm pleased to be joined by a couple of my distinguished colleagues tonight. I have with me Congressman Ralph Norman from South Carolina and Congressman Clay Higgins from Louisiana. And I invite Mr. Norman to share thoughts that he has on this topic tonight.